The Lancaster Country Club's dining room sparkled with crystal and silver as my parents celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary surrounded by 200 of their closest friends, business associates, and extended family. Mom had spent months planning this event, insisting on the most elegant venue, the finest catering, and formal invitations printed on heavy cardstock that probably cost more per sheet than most people spend on lunch. I sat at table 7, strategically positioned near the back where I could observe without drawing too much attention to myself. My simple navy dress and minimal jewelry marked me as distinctly underdressed compared to the other guests, who seemed to be competing for who could wear the most expensive designer outfit to honor Gerald and Patricia Foster's 4 decades of marriage. Ladies and gentlemen, Dad's voice boomed through the microphone as he prepared to give his anniversary speech. The conversations gradually died down as attention focused on the distinguished couple at the head table. Patricia and I are overwhelmed by your presence here tonight. I'd heard versions of this speech before at various family gatherings, so I knew the general outline. Dad would thank everyone for coming, recount some amusing anecdotes from their early marriage, and eventually work his way around to discussing their children's accomplishments, a topic that never failed to make me uncomfortable. We've been blessed with 2 wonderful children, Dad continued, gesturing toward my brother Marcus at table 2. Our son Marcus has built a thriving dental practice and given us 3 beautiful grandchildren. Marcus beamed and raised his wine glass toward the crowd. At 35, he was everything my parents had hoped for in a son. Professionally successful, financially stable, married to a lovely woman from a good family, and living in the right kind of suburban house with the right kind of mortgage. And our daughter. Dad paused, his eyes scanning the room until they found me. Well, our daughter is still finding her way. The familiar knot formed in my stomach. I'd been still finding my way, according to my parents, for the past 12 years, ever since I'd graduated from Princeton with a PhD in chemistry at age 24 and declined to pursue what they considered a proper career path. Dr. Sarah Foster has always been our little scientist. Mom chimed in from beside him, taking the microphone with practiced ease. Even as a child, she was mixing chemicals in the basement, much to our horror. Polite laughter rippled through the crowd. I managed a weak smile while internally cringing at the way she made my childhood fascination with chemistry sound like an amusing phase, rather than the foundation of a serious scientific career. She's still playing around in laboratories. Mom continued with that indulgent tone she used when discussing my life choices. Our daughter's little science hobby. Nothing too serious, just playing in labs here and there. The casual dismissal hit me like a physical blow. 12 years of groundbreaking research, revolutionary discoveries that were reshaping our understanding of molecular chemistry, and dozens of peer-reviewed publications reduced to playing around in laboratories. My life's work characterized as a hobby, like collecting stamps or gardening on weekends. What made it worse was that Mom genuinely believed she was being supportive. In her worldview, acknowledging that I had a PhD made her a progressive parent, even if she couldn't quite grasp what I actually did with that education. We keep hoping she'll settle down and find something more stable, Dad added with a chuckle. Maybe teach high school chemistry or work for a pharmaceutical company. Something with regular hours and good benefits. The suggestion that I should teach high school chemistry, not that there's anything wrong with teaching, revealed how completely they misunderstood the scope and significance of my work. I wasn't someone who needed to find a job. I was someone who had dedicated my life to pushing the boundaries of human knowledge in ways that could potentially transform medicine, energy, and materials science. but explaining quantum chemistry and molecular engineering to parents who thought playing in labs was an adequate description of research science had proven impossible. After years of failed attempts to bridge that gap, I'd given up trying to educate them about what I actually did for a living. The truth was far more complex than my parents could imagine. While they thought I was struggling to find direction, I'd spent the last 8 years conducting research that had already led to 3 major breakthroughs in catalytic chemistry. My work on enzyme mimetics had opened new pathways for drug development. My research on carbon capture technologies was being implemented by energy companies around the world, and my latest project, developing synthetic processes that could revolutionize materials manufacturing, had attracted attention from the highest levels of the scientific community. But none of that translated into the kind of success my parents could recognize or value. I didn't have a corner office, a secretary, or a salary they could brag about at dinner parties. I had research grants, laboratory access, and the respect of my peers, currencies that didn't register in their understanding of professional achievement. "We're proud of Sarah's intelligence," Mom continued, "but we do worry about her future. The academic world is so uncertain, and she's 36 now. We just want her to find security and stability." Security and stability. The eternal parental concerns that completely missed the point of why I'd chosen this path. I wasn't pursuing chemistry for job security. I was pursuing it because I believed I could contribute to discoveries that might help solve some of humanity's most pressing problems. But enough about our children's career anxieties, Dad said with a laugh that made my face burn with embarrassment. Tonight is about celebrating 40 years of marriage and the wonderful friends who supported us along the way. I sat back in my chair, trying to become invisible as the speech moved on to other topics. Around me, I could feel the sympathetic glances from other guests who just learned about the Foster family's charity case. The brilliant but impractical daughter who'd chosen intellectual pursuits over financial responsibility. The irony was suffocating. Just last month, I had received confirmation that my research on synthetic enzyme catalysts had been selected for implementation in a major pharmaceutical manufacturing process. The licensing fees alone would generate more income than Marcus's dental practice earned in a year. But because I'd published the work through my university affiliation rather than a private company, my parents had no framework for understanding its significance. "Sarah, dear," Mrs. Williamson from table 6 approached during the cocktail hour that followed dinner. "Your mother mentioned you work in science. How interesting. What kind of laboratory work do you do?" It was a genuine question from a kind woman, but I'd learned to keep my answers simple to avoid confusion. "I research new ways to create chemical compounds," I said carefully. "Oh, like developing new medicines?" she asked hopefully. "Sometimes. My work has applications in medicine, energy, and manufacturing." "How wonderful," she said with that polite smile people use when they're trying to be encouraging, but have no idea what you're talking about. "I'm sure it's very fulfilling, even if it's not as financially rewarding as other careers." There it was, the assumption that meaningful work and financial success were mutually exclusive, that I'd chosen intellectual satisfaction over practical compensation. Mrs. Williamson meant well, but her comment revealed how completely my parents had framed my career choices to their social circle. "It has its rewards," I said diplomatically. The evening progressed with more conversations along similar lines. People asked polite questions about my research, offered gentle encouragement about eventually finding stable employment, and shared stories about their own children's more conventional career paths. I smiled and nodded and tried not to let the casual condescension get under my skin. By 9 o'clock, I was mentally calculating how much longer I needed to stay before I could politely escape. Mom would expect me to remain for the cake cutting and probably the first dance, but after that, I could slip away and return to my apartment where I could review the latest data from my current experiment without having to explain why I found molecular structures more fascinating than small talk about vacation destinations. Then my phone rang. The ringtone cut through the ambient conversation like a knife. I glanced at the screen and saw an international number with a country code I didn't immediately recognize. Normally, I would have declined the call and returned it later, but something about the timing made me hesitate. "Excuse me," I murmured to the table, stepping away to take the call in a quieter corner of the room. "Hello, this is Dr. Sarah Foster." "Dr. Foster, this is Professor Erik Lindqvist from the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences in Stockholm." My heart stopped. The Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences. There was only one reason they would be calling me directly. "I'm calling to inform you that you have been selected as this year's recipient of the Nobel Prize in Chemistry for your revolutionary work on synthetic enzyme catalysis and its applications to sustainable manufacturing processes." The world tilted on its axis. The Nobel Prize. The highest honor in scientific achievement. The recognition that marked a researcher as one of the most important contributors to human knowledge in their field. Are you certain?" I managed to whisper. "Absolutely certain, Dr. Foster. The committee was unanimous in their decision. Your research has fundamentally changed our understanding of catalytic processes and opened new pathways for environmentally sustainable chemistry. We'll be making the public announcement tomorrow morning, but I wanted to give you advance notice." I was holding my phone with trembling hands, barely able to process what I was hearing. The Nobel Prize for my little science hobby. "Dr. Foster, are you there?" "Yes, I'm here," I said, though my voice sounded strange to my own ears. "Congratulations, Dr. Foster. This is a well-deserved recognition of truly groundbreaking work." I thanked him and hung up, still staring at my phone like it might have been playing some kind of elaborate prank. The Nobel Prize in Chemistry, for work my parents described as playing around in laboratories. I looked across the room at Mom and Dad, who were holding court near the head table, completely unaware that their disappointment of a daughter had just received the highest honor in scientific achievement. Without really thinking about what I was doing, I walked back toward the center of the room where most of the guests were gathered. "Excuse me," I said loudly enough to get attention. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just received some news that I think you might want to hear." Conversations died down as people turned to see what the quiet foster daughter had to say. "I just got a phone call from Stockholm," I announced, my voice growing stronger as I spoke. "From the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences." I could see my parents exchanging confused glances. Stockholm meant nothing to them, but I noticed Dr. Peterson from Table 4 straightening up with sudden attention. As a retired physics professor, he understood exactly what a call from Stockholm implied. They called to inform me that I've been awarded this year's Nobel Prize in Chemistry. The silence that followed was so complete, I could hear the ice maker cycling in the kitchen. 200 guests stared at me like I just announced that I was actually an alien from another planet. "The Nobel Prize?" Mom's voice was barely a whisper. "For my work on synthetic enzyme catalysis," I continued, feeling like I was in some kind of dream. "The research I've been conducting for the past 8 years. The little science hobby you mentioned in your speech." Dad's champagne glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor, the crystal fragments scattering across the polished hardwood. "Sarah," he said slowly, Are you saying you won the Nobel Prize? The actual Nobel Prize? Yes, Dad. The actual Nobel Prize. Dr. Peterson suddenly stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced to the room, do you understand what this means? Dr. Foster has just received the highest honor in scientific achievement. She's won the Nobel Prize. The room erupted. Conversations exploded as people tried to process this information. Phones came out as guests started Googling Nobel Prize chemistry and Sarah Foster. The quiet, unsuccessful daughter had just revealed herself to be one of the most distinguished scientists in the world. But Mom was struggling to form complete sentences. But you work in a laboratory. You don't have a real job. Mom, I said gently, I am one of the leading researchers in catalytic chemistry. My work has been published in every major scientific journal. Universities around the world use my research in their graduate programs. Graduate programs? Dad repeated faintly. The work I do isn't a hobby, I continued. It's groundbreaking research that's changing how we understand chemical processes. The Nobel Committee just recognized it as some of the most important scientific work being done today. Mrs. Williamson approached with her phone in her hand, looking stunned. Sarah, I just looked you up online. There are dozens of articles about your research. The New York Times called you one of the most innovative chemists of your generation. The New York Times wrote about you? Mom asked weakly. Several times, I confirmed. Most recently when my carbon capture research was implemented by 3 major energy companies. You work with energy companies. Dad's voice cracked on the question. Among others, pharmaceutical companies license my research for drug development. Manufacturing firms use my processes to create new materials. The work I do has applications across dozens of industries. The scope of their misunderstanding was becoming clear to everyone in the room. For 12 years, my parents had described me as an aimless academic while I had been building a reputation as one of the most important researchers in my field. Dr. Foster, a voice called from across the room. I turned to see Professor Martinez from the local university, someone I'd met briefly at academic conferences. I had no idea you were the Sarah Foster. Your enzyme research is revolutionary. We've been using your papers in our advanced chemistry seminars for years. Thank you, I said, still feeling surreal about this public recognition. Nobel Prize winner, he continued, shaking his head in amazement. Do you realize you're the first Nobel laureate our city has ever produced? The first Nobel laureate? Mom repeated, like she was testing whether the words made sense. Professor Martinez nodded enthusiastically. Dr. Foster's work is going to be in textbooks for generations. Her synthetic enzyme research has opened entirely new fields of study. I could see my parents trying to reconcile this new information with their fundamental understanding of who I was and what I'd been doing with my life. The daughter they'd worried about, the woman they described as unstable and directionless, had just been recognized as one of the most accomplished scientists in the world. Sarah. Marcus appeared at my side, his face pale with shock. Is this real? Did you actually win the Nobel Prize? Yes, Marcus, it's real. But you never said, you never told us you were doing anything this important. It was a fair point, but the answer was complicated. How do you explain to your family that you stopped sharing your achievements because they consistently dismissed them as unimportant? I tried to tell you, I said gently. Remember when my first major paper was published in Nature? I was excited about it, and I tried to explain what it meant, but you said it sounded too academic and theoretical. Marcus's face flushed as the memory hit him. You tried to show us the journal, and I said nobody reads that stuff except other professors. Nature, Professor Martinez interrupted, is the most prestigious scientific journal in the world. Publishing in Nature is like winning an Oscar for scientists. An Oscar? Mom said weakly. And Dr. Foster hasn't just published in Nature, Professor Martinez continued. Apparently oblivious to the family drama he was intensifying. She's published in Science, JACS, Chemical Reviews, every top-tier journal in chemistry. Her citation index is extraordinary. Each piece of information hit my family like a separate revelation. The language of scientific achievement was foreign to them, but Professor Martinez was translating it into terms they could understand. When I got the Breakthrough Prize last year, I added quietly, I mentioned it at Christmas dinner. You said it sounded like a nice honor, and asked if it came with any money. The Breakthrough Prize? Professor Martinez looked amazed. You won the Breakthrough Prize too. Dr. Foster, that's a $3 million award. $3 million? Dad's voice cracked completely. Just the prize money, I confirmed. The research grants and licensing fees are separate. Licensing fees? Mom asked faintly. Companies pay to use my research in their products and processes, I explained. The pharmaceutical applications alone generate about $2 million annually. The numbers were clearly overwhelming their ability to process this information. For years, they'd worried about my financial stability, while I'd been earning more money than they could imagine. Dr. Foster, another voice joined the conversation. I turned to see Dr. Kim, the chief of research at the Regional Medical Center. I didn't realize you were here tonight. Your enzyme work has been crucial to our new drug development program. Thank you, Dr. Kim. We've been hoping to arrange a consultation with you, she continued. Your synthetic enzyme research could revolutionize how we approach certain cancer treatments. Cancer treatments? Mom whispered. Dr. Foster's work has applications in targeted drug delivery, Dr. Kim explained. Her synthetic enzymes could help us develop treatments that are more effective and have fewer side effects. I could see my parents struggling to understand how their daughter's little hobby was connected to cancer research and drug development. The gap between their perception and reality was so vast, it seemed impossible to bridge. Ladies and gentlemen, Dad's voice suddenly boomed through the microphone again. The room quieted as attention returned to the head table. I need to make an announcement. He looked directly at me, his eyes bright with tears. 30 minutes ago, I told you that my daughter was still finding her way. I described her work as a little hobby, something she was just playing around with. His voice broke slightly. I was wrong. Completely, embarrassingly wrong. The room was absolutely silent. My daughter has just been awarded the Nobel Prize in Chemistry, he continued. She's not finding her way. She's leading the way. She's not playing around in laboratories. She's conducting research that's changing the world. He paused, looking directly at me across the room. Sarah, I'm sorry. We're sorry. We didn't understand what you were doing because we never took the time to really listen and learn. We measured your success by our standards instead of recognizing that you were operating at a level we couldn't even comprehend. The apology hung in the air like a bridge between the past and whatever came next. Dr. Foster, Professor Martinez said quietly, would you mind if we asked some questions about your research? I think everyone here would love to understand what Nobel Prize-winning chemistry actually involves. For the first time in years, someone was asking about my work with genuine curiosity rather than polite obligation. I'd be happy to explain, I said. And for the next hour, I found myself giving an impromptu lecture on enzyme catalysis to 200 wedding guests, explaining how synthetic enzymes could revolutionize manufacturing, reduce environmental impact, and create new medical treatments. My parents listened with rapt attention, asking questions that revealed they were finally trying to understand what I'd devoted my life to pursuing. "So when you said you were working on carbon capture," Mom said slowly, "you meant you were developing technology to fight climate change?" "Essentially, yes. My synthetic enzymes can capture carbon dioxide more efficiently than existing methods and convert it into useful materials." "And this is important work?" Dad asked. Professor Martinez laughed. "Important? Dr. Foster's research could help save the planet. The Nobel Committee doesn't give prizes for minor contributions." As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, my parents approached me with expressions I'd never seen before, a mixture of awe, respect, and something that might have been pride. "Sarah," Mom said, tears flowing freely now, "I don't know how to apologize for tonight, for all the nights. We've been describing you as a failure when you're actually one of the most accomplished scientists in the world," Dad finished. "How do we come back from that?" It was a fair question, and it deserved an honest answer. "By understanding that I never wanted you to change your opinion of me," I said gently. "I just wanted you to respect that I was following my own path, even when you couldn't see where it was leading." "Can you teach us?" Mom asked suddenly. "I mean, really teach us about what you do. I want to understand your work, your achievements, your world." "I'd like that," I said and meant it. As we gathered our things to leave, Dad pulled me aside. "Sarah, I have one more question." "Okay. Are you happy? With your research, your life, everything you've built, are you happy?" It was such a dad question, cutting straight to what mattered most. "Yes," I said simply. "I'm doing exactly what I was meant to do, solving problems that fascinate me, contributing to human knowledge in ways that might help people. I can't imagine being happier." "Good," he said, and hugged me tighter than he had in years. "That's all that really matters." Walking out of the Lancaster Country Club that night, I felt like the world had shifted on its axis. The secret was out, the pretense was over, and for the first time in years, my family knew exactly who I was and what I'd accomplished. It wasn't the anniversary celebration my parents had planned, but it was the beginning of a new kind of relationship, one built on truth instead of assumptions, understanding instead of judgment. And as I drove home to my apartment, past the university where my research was changing the future, I realized that being truly known for who I was felt better than any prize ever could. The Nobel Prize was just the world's way of confirming what I'd always known. Sometimes the most important work happens in laboratories, away from the spotlight, pursued by people who care more about discovery than recognition. But having my family finally understand that my little hobby was actually my life's calling, that was worth more than any award could ever be.